All right, we're going to get started. Welcome everybody to the 9th session of the 5th annual Puget Sound Green Infrastructure Summit webinar series. I am really excited. We have faced a blizzard, we've faced a pandemic now, and we are moving this work forward. And I'm so glad that you're here as part of it to engage in the work and join us in this community of thought leaders in green infrastructure. So thank you for being here. I am Aaron Clark from Stewardship Partners, and I want to start us off with a welcome and a land acknowledgement. So on behalf of Stewardship Partners and the Summit Host Committee, I would like to acknowledge that we are all on the traditional land of the first people of this region. Tacoma, where the summit was originally scheduled to be hosted, is the traditional land of the Puyallup tribe, and we honor with gratitude the land itself and the Puyallup tribe, who have been faithful stewards of the land, water, and ancient history of life there since time immemorial. Many of us attending this summit from other parts of the region are on the land of other indigenous communities. And if you don't currently know on whose traditional land you live, work, and play, please take a moment to find out and acknowledge the land and its first people wherever you are for a moment. As we wrap up this summit with today's session, I thank the sponsors every session, but I just can't say it enough. These folks have been amazing support for the Stewardship Partners organization and the Green Infrastructure Summit in general. Huge thanks to our title sponsors, Boeing and King County, as well as the Nature Conservancy, Parametrics, the Russell Family Foundation, Seattle Public Utilities, City of Tacoma, Stantec, Geosyntec, Pierce County Parks, Jacobs, Herrera, the Pierce Conservation District, MIG, Aspect Consulting, King Conservation District, Salmon Safe, and the Washington Environmental Council. You guys are awesome. Thank you. And a huge thank you, a huge debt of gratitude to our host committee. These folks have really been through thick and thin. They've planned this event twice. They've coordinated with speakers. They've helped recruit. Everything that you see here was possible because of them. So huge thanks to Arusa and Kevin at ECOS, to Kathy at MIG, to Hannah at the Nature Conservancy, Ryan Mello at the Conservation District, Carrie Hernandez at the Puyallup Watershed Initiative, who you'll get to hear from today, Fabiola from the Russell Family Foundation, and Ani from WSU Extension. Huge thanks to our advisory committee as well. You guys helped a lot as well. And I just can't tell you guys how proud I am to be a part of the convener groups here that put this event on. A huge thanks to Cascadia Consulting, Lynn Knapp, Brent Edgar, you guys rock. And of course the Stewardship Partners team here in our 20th year of as an organization and 5th year as the convener of this event. Huge thanks to Emma Vowles and Todd Albertson. You guys kick butt. Couldn't have done it without you guys, so thank you. Now on to Zoom tips. You all have been on some Zoom webinars before, I bet. There may be 1 or 2 newbies out there, but because this is a webinar, it's a little different than a Zoom meeting. Just to let you know that the session is being recorded. You'll be able to find the recording of the session on the Stewardship Partners YouTube page by early next week, I expect. And all the other sessions, all 9 of them will be up there soon. As an attendee, you are muted and your video is off. You actually do not have the ability to change that. And we will start the session with presentations and we'll end with Q&A. But if you have questions at any point during the webinar, one of the great things about this platform, you can click on the Q&A button down at the bottom. You can type your question and you can likely get an answer from one of the speakers before the session is over. Or it may go into a discussion that we talk about at the end as part of a panel discussion. So those are all there. If you have a technical question, for some reason your audio is not working, or you have you can't hear one of the speakers or something, send that message via chat and we will address it as well. When you're done with the meeting, or if you have to leave before the meeting is over, click the leave button down in the bottom right corner of your screen. So with that, I'm going to hand the reins over to Ani Jackaran, who's been a great friend of this event for years, a member of the host committee since the beginning, and really a great friend and colleague. So Ani, with that, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Aaron. Good morning, my name is Ani Jayakaran, and I'm an associate professor at WSU and affiliated with the Washington Stormwater Center. Carrie Hernandez, Fabiola Greenwald, and myself worked on putting this session together. And it's an honor for me to moderate this session, this closing session dedicated to Green's infrastructure in the South Sound region. I am very excited to hear the next 5 speakers and the 4 talks they put together. The longer I work in the sciences, the more I realize that while it is important to build more resilient rain gardens and permeable pavements, even more critical is understanding the communities in which GI is placed. So as you listen to the next 4 talks, you will hear about that journey that our speakers took to understand community and their relationship to the environment around them. For those of us who live in the South Sound, we know this is where a lot of GI is needed as development booms around us. This is also where a lot of critical conversations on social and racial inequity have to happen, and happen soon. In many ways, the South Sound epitomizes the struggles that communities and ecosystems face across the country. So without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker, who is Carrie Hernandez. Carrie is the program manager for the Stormwater Community of Interest at the Puyallup Watershed Initiative. Her work focuses on the different sources of water pollution in industrial and residential areas of the Puyallup River watershed and how people connect to it. Carrie is a Puget Sound transplant, like many of us, coming here from a deeply rural agricultural community in Nebraska. Observations about how differently people view rainfall in rural and urban areas led her down this career path of stormwater. Rain is part of our regional identity. Saying Puget Sound or the Pacific Northwest conjures up images of rain, water, mountains, and trees. We let the rain touch us. We find a million ways to be outside in it. We define being local by going outside without umbrellas and simply pulling up our hood or setting up on our favorite hat and stepping out on the street. Rain and stormwater are part of our story. Keeping it free of pollution is the challenge that we face. As Carrie welcomes everyone to the South Sound today, listen to see where your character fits in the story. What is your role? How do you connect with others? How can you speak about stormwater to celebrate that part of our identity and be inclusive in solutions? Thank you, Carrie. Please take it away.
Great, thank you, Ani. Welcome to the South Sound virtually. When you have a chance, come and visit this place. Walk along the river, hike the foothill trails and Mount Rainier, visit our towns, join our salmon homecoming festivals, watch our daffodil parade, stop by our farm stands, take part in local people's assembly movements and neighborhood gatherings. Spend a night in Tacoma and spend a day at the waterfront. Kayak or paddleboard in Commencement Bay. I could go on, but I think you get the idea. Welcome to the South Sound. In this picture, you see a beautiful view of the Puyallup River looking from Tacoma East towards Mount Rainier. I think this picture really captures the essence of the Pacific Northwest. When the sun is shining and you can see Mount Rainier in the distance, it makes people want to go out and explore and connect to nature. I would like to thank Aaron for grounding us to this place and reminding us all that we are not the original people of the Puyallup River watershed. The Puyallup and Muckleshoot tribes inhabit these lands and are fierce protectors of it. Acknowledging their rights and respecting their relationship to this place is an important step in repairing the whole system. In welcoming you to the South Sound, I'd like to provide some background about the people who live here. In Tacoma and Pierce County's history, as well as its present, racism and xenophobia found roots to grow. The Chinese expulsion of 1885, the Japanese internment of 1942, ongoing erasure of local tribes and treaty rights, ongoing redlining, and housing immigrants at the detention center are just a few examples of racist practices in the South Sound. There was a long period of time when these actions of hate were ignored or people thought they were justifiable. Sometimes we are taught that racism has ended, and that is a part of US history and not its present. Environmental justice and the climate movement are modern tools to use to recognize and end racist practices that harm people and the environment. In the Puget Sound region, white people in positions of power, and decision makers need to work harder and faster to end racism and oppression. We need to stop trying to erase the voices of historically marginalized and underrepresented people and instead amplify them. Movements are happening, but there is a long way to go. I'd like to highlight what other presenters in this series have said. Now is the time to get rid of the broken systems being exposed by the coronavirus pandemic. What better time to take meaningful steps forward to help heal and repair people and the planet? I have heard and appreciate the work others are doing in the region with regards to listening to and working with historically marginalized and underrepresented people and groups. Successfully demonstrating this continues to set a new standard of practice. Stormwater is about more than just engineering, and by focusing our efforts on the communities it affects and whom we serve, we can challenge previous non-inclusive systems in our work. Another part of South Sound history is this story of our Superfund cleanups. There have been tens of millions of dollars spent on Superfund cleanups in the South Sound. The Theophos Waterway, Port of Tacoma, nearshore tide flat areas of Comiskent Bay, Point Ruston, the Asarco smelter remediation, and many more cleanups have been ongoing for close to 2 decades. These Superfund and Brownsfield cleanups are led by the City of Tacoma, Pierce County, the state, and the businesses that contributed to the pollution. It took the coordination of many government entities, businesses, and the voices of residents to ensure that the cleanup included protections for all things living here. These efforts to remediate the land and work to prevent future pollution on such a large scale are a positive part of our history. The City of Tacoma and surrounding cities in our watershed are in a period of renaissance and growth, which creates many opportunities to reconnect with the people who are living here. I want to extend an invitation to all of you to come and see these Superfund cleanups as they are now and help us celebrate the work of community coming together for the cleanup. Superfund pollution was directly tied to business and industrial activity. What do we do about pollution that does not come from businesses? How do we leverage source control programs cities are doing with green stormwater infrastructure in residential areas? How do we know which green infrastructure works best for which neighborhood? What can be installed that people will help maintain? Here in Pierce County, the Puyallup Watershed Initiative's Stormwater Community of Interest and the Nature Conservancy are working together to identify opportunities for collaboration between those working on water quality projects on public and private property. This effort, called the Residential Stormwater Work Group, is working with implementers, community members, and jurisdictions to do a collaborative needs assessment. We are wrestling with the question of how do we work together to move forward large-scale stormwater efforts in partnership with the people it most affects. This work group started meeting at the end of 2019, leveraging partnerships that were built before that. The work will be based on a needs assessment from input from jurisdictions, implementers, and community voices. Like some of your work, these plans have slowed and shifted as things change with the pandemic and the stay home, stay safe orders. We are able to gather virtually. We have been speaking to jurisdictions in the Puyallup watershed to learn about specific regulations and projects impacting residential stormwater. We have been convening a group that we call implementers. These people are on the ground managing projects and educating the public about stormwater. We use the term community to acknowledge the people who will be impacted by the work of these partners. We anticipate that the composition of community gatherings will change based on the emerging needs of any neighborhood or proposed project area. The work group has started to develop relationships with a few different advocacy groups in the South Sound knowing that trust and communication take time to nurture. The framework we are proposing for the residential work group enables jurisdictions and implementers to more effectively identify and connect at the community and neighborhood level. We are working to make stormwater projects beneficial to community members who will live with them for every day for decades to come. A lot of barriers are exposed when people provide feedback on engineered stormwater projects. We hope to elevate concerns of the community or help knock down some of these barriers. Having this work group allows for some pivot points and the flexibility to hear the feedback and maybe lean on other organizations to address concerns and needs that arise that are not directly tied to stormwater. We are seeing more and more that stormwater and stormwater management do not stand alone, and that multifaceted approaches might allow for greater community unity and healing alongside cleaner water. For our next steps, what we are seeing as the pandemic evolves is that there are many places where stormwater work and human health are connected. Our next steps are tied to the phased reopening of activities and events in Pierce County. Until the county reopens, we will continue to keep communication flowing and look for opportunities to help each other and our community in the COVID relief efforts. Please look out for your neighbors and stay safe and healthy. Better days are ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. I'll just remind everyone that there's a question and answer chat box in the bottom of your screen if you have questions for Carrie. Our next speakers are our next two speakers are Kennedy Peterson and Russ Schaub from UW Tacoma. Kennedy is a UW-T undergrad in the Urban Design program and the Community Outreach Director for Civitas, which is the university's Urban Studies student group. Russ is also a UW-T undergrad student in the Urban Design program and the president of Civitas. So Kennedy and Russ, would you take it away?
Absolutely. Thank you for the introduction. Our project was around the expectations and realities of green infrastructure projects. We can tell you a little bit about, yeah, go ahead. The project, once the slide switches, sorry. Can you click it?
There we go.
Okay, so the project was a series, it's a summary of a series of interviews with community members around the expectations and realities of green infrastructure that was implemented into their communities. So for the project, we visited various sites where green infrastructure investments have been made, and we spoke to residents, neighbors, and community members who were involved in the project to ask them how the projects have held up. So for some of these projects, it's been several years since most of them have been implemented. So we were eager to hear if those realities reflected the expectations or not. The project was envisioned to be an eye-opener to some of the issues that we may not be aware of within this community, as well as how green infrastructure investments have been sustainable and nurtured the communities as well.
So a lot of times people didn't really know what a rain garden was when we asked them. And I'm assuming many people do know what it is, but rain garden essentially is a garden that is built to capture stormwater runoff, and it then filters all these pollutants and then pushes it to clean water. Pretty straightforward. It seemed that when we did go out and meet a lot of people that they weren't really too sure what a rain garden was, so we often had to explain it. And then we looked at a couple different types. We looked at some suburban and urban projects. There were a few that were kind of under maintained, but we can get into that a little bit later. We did see some large scale gardens and a few small ones as well.
So we use soundimpacts.org to explore the local areas with an abundance of rain gardens. So specifically, we looked at 8th Avenue Northwest in Puyallup, which is a larger development, the University of Washington Tacoma campus, the Bates campus in Hilltop, and then neighborhoods with churches and schools, which were often the places that had the green infrastructure. So to start, the expectations that we were set out to see that have been held up were that the rain gardens were environmentally beneficial. So they collected that stormwater runoff and installed proper drainage systems to reduce pollutants going into the water bodies. They were to prevent or reduce flooding on streets. They were to support the ecological environment and have cohesive ecosystems, and that there was a limited maintenance expectation.
And then a few of the rain gardens, as I mentioned before, were urban and suburban. This one in particular was at the Division, or it's at the intersection of Division and Sprague, and it sits right in front of a church. Now, we weren't able to talk to anyone, but it did seem that it was maintained probably by the groundskeepers. Every time that we had gone, it was always pretty clean and upkept. And then this one as well is a church. So this was one that unfortunately was replaced by just grass. When we did talk to people that use the church, they said that they just mow over it. So it was initially a corner rain garden, and just through, I guess, uneducation or not really knowing what it was, they just mowed over it. And it now just has a couple of plants and it's full of grass. And then the last one for the urban would be the UW Tacoma rain garden that runs along through campus. So this one was maintained by the campus, but if campus wasn't available, then they would reach out to the city, and the city would come out and they would clean it. They would trim anything back, but it's mostly maintained by campus.
So to go into the suburban rain gardens, this is where we saw the larger scale rain gardens, and this was the one that we followed up the most on, mostly because this is the one that we were able to gain a lot of feedback and comments about. This rain garden, there's actually the entire street is full of rain gardens and green infrastructure measures. The whole street is, and you can see pictures here, there's pervious pavement on the streets as well as the sidewalk, and then there's tons of rain gardens along almost every single person's home. And we had the opportunity to speak to a few homeowners, and the one that gave us the most information, her name is Bert. She actually has the largest rain garden on the site. Unfortunately, oh, we have a weird thing on our slide. Sorry, guys. But here's some quotes from Bert that really helped to solidify what we were finding on the street. So what she said was the whole project that was implemented really brought the community together, and they started to really watch out for each other. Originally, they were just, classic neighbors. They would just wave at each other, say hi, but wouldn't really talk. When this project was implemented, it allowed them to get really involved with the rest of the neighborhood and do this type of thing together. She said that it could still build up community if the city and more volunteers came out often. And she said that unfortunately, as much as the site, it's still sustainable and the rain gardens are still doing what they're supposed to do. However, she feels that they still need a little bit more support with these new homeowners, because often the people that are either move there and sell their homes or rent and move out are not relaying the information to new renters or homeowners. And so those people are unaware that these are not just regular landscape sections, that they're actually rain gardens and that they need to be maintained in a specific way and taken care of. And also she did speak a little bit about the school over the road, which I think is Asher Elementary. Don't quote me, I could be wrong, I can't remember, but she said that the only reason the kids know about these rain gardens or the concept in general is because one of the teachers actually brings the class down each year and uses this street as a teaching tool, which was really cool to hear. Another suburban rain garden that we talked about is, we didn't actually get to go to this site. However, we did speak to the homeowner. His name is Rob. He works with Orcas Love Rain Gardens. These were planted last October through the resources provided through the Pierce Conservation District. So comparing the two rain gardens here, we got to see the difference between one that was done by a homeowner themselves with assistance, and then one that was done by the city and kind of just implemented into a neighborhood street, and how those two differ. Specifically with Rob, he was a lot more educated along the concept because he had to do it himself and he was instructed that way. Whereas the other ones on 8th Avenue have been kind of left out because they weren't given that sort of resource or, continuous resource. It was just kind of put in and then left.
And then there's two sides to every story, right? So the positive realities brought the community together, encourages people to spend time outside, with its pride and ownership, giving somebody a sense of identity, and then it encourages a conscious effort into fighting climate change and prolonging long-term effects of polluted stormwater. And the negative realities are just the lack of education or maintenance, and then the like supportive resources, so like having the city come out and help. It's a little bit spaced out, or just rain garden acknowledgement in general. So we got the question, what is that? What's a rain garden? Or no, we just mow over that. Or support given to the public, again, from the city and stuff like that.
I just want to note the two images on the right kind of compare the two. So it kind of compares the positive and negative realities. The L Street Garden that we talked to prior is the installation at Miles Memorial Church, and the one on the right is the one at UW, which is the rain garden along the Prairie Line Trail. We noticed just by observation as well as talking to people that the difference between these rain gardens that are a little bit off to the side and not really deep in neighborhoods and not really ones that are obvious and shown off typically are the ones that aren't taken care of or maintained, not only by the city, but also by the homeowners. Whereas like the one on campus it's maintained, I think it was quarterly, semi-yearly, and then like annually. They have very specific deadlines on how they do these things. So it was very clear to us that there's a difference between the two sides. And then from our observations and our comments that we got, we kind of put together a list of things that was input on how to enhance these positive realities and stray further away from the negative realities. One of the points that was brought up to us was to connect to local values. So this is something that Orca's Love Rain Gardens does, and what Rob spoke to a lot. He spoke to the fact that people are a lot more willing to not only implement these infrastructures into their own homes, but also get involved in the education of it if it's connected to something that they value and care about. Going along with that is getting the younger generation involved and making them aware of the possibilities with green infrastructure, which is something that Orca's Love Rain Gardens does, and that we thought was really powerful, because if you get them started on it, there's a very high chance that they'll be really into it and convince their parents to do anything. A third point is to develop that stronger support system for homeowners. We thought a potential thing could be a volunteer team, which is actually something that Bert from the 8th Avenue project said she would be interested in. So, developing a team that's their one job, is to go out and to make sure that these people have the resources and the education, and not only just going and maintaining the gardens, but as they're doing it, making sure that they're telling the homeowners what they're doing, what they can do, and not just going out and doing it themselves. Because that way, that's how we get the neighborhood and the neighborhood members more involved, is if they know what they're doing and they feel passionate about it. And then another thing is outreach programs. So educating the community a little bit more to know what's available to them to create and design a garden in their own homes, which is something that the Pierce Conservation does, as well as stewardship partners. But I have spoken directly with, or specifically with, the Pierce Conservation District after this to implement my own rain garden. So, and that was something that wasn't, on my mind until I did this project. And it's because I was more, educated by it, and I found more passion by getting to know more about this and getting to talk to community members that it's significantly impacted them. So. And then I guess we'll just speak to this. We were actively working on a video and audio recording that encompassed the community responses to our questions. Unfortunately, the coronavirus got in the way of that. So that portion of our project is on hold. If anybody would still like to see it, if that's something that people are interested in, and we are more than happy to do that. But it, obviously it won't happen for a while. I don't think people are too keen on strangers knocking on their door in this state. So, but yeah.
It's on its way.
It's on its way.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, Russ and Kennedy, thank you so much.
Thank you.
There's a question for you in the question and answer section, if you want to tackle that. Our next speaker is Tuana Nobles, and she will present a talk titled Environmental Justice Camps, Nature and Career Possibilities for Girls of Color. Tuana had to sum up her work with women and girls in Pierce County, she would say it is about creating a sisterhood of lifelong relationships that provide memories to inspire who and what they are becoming. For a more complete picture of Tuanu, we have someone special to introduce her now.
I'm Alea. I'm her daughter, I guess. I do her environmental justice camps every year, and basically what we do is we learn about the different things that we use like in the everyday world that contributes to pollution and what we should stop using. We go on different rides around Tacoma. We get to see the pollution in the ocean, and we get to pick that up too. We get to wander on the beaches, picking up trash, and we actually end up painting with them, so that's really cool. Yeah, that's what I have. Okay, that's what I have.
Good. Thank you. So Alea is my daughter, and I'm grateful that she's here with me today. She has been attending the environmental justice camp since we started them 3 summers ago. But I am Tawana Nobles, president and CEO of Tacoma Urban League, and 3 years ago approached Citizens for a Healthy Bay with this idea to engage more communities of color and more young people, in particular girls in our community, to learn about environmental justice and to explore why there are discrepancies, why there are disproportionate negative impacts on specific areas of our community. And we really focused on bringing this message and research and learning home, to not think about there are communities that don't possess the same opportunities across the world, but right here in Pierce County, right here in Tacoma, right here in University Place, in Fircrest. And it has been an amazing journey. So we expose girls to, as Alea mentioned, we do beach cleanups, we go out on boat patrols, and dive into redlining and take a look at the equity index and connect the past to the present. Similar to what Carrie mentioned, it is important to understand that racism and discrimination and disproportionate impacts when it comes to environment and environmental justice are not issues of the past. These are issues of the present. And we, as Russ and Kennedy mentioned, we start with younger generations to let them know that they can be environmental stewards now. They can champion the environment now. So I'm gonna move to my next slide and talk a little bit more about what we do. So in our environmental justice camps, we have established so many partnerships. When we first started, it was Tacoma Urban League and Citizens for a Healthy Bay. And the entire goal was to expose more girls of color, primarily African-American girls, but more girls of color to science and to STEM careers, to let them know that being in the community, that grassroots science leadership is in fact being scientists, and we have been fairly successful. And so we started our camps with exploring what is tide pooling, and taking the girls out. We have this really great journal that helps them to explore little critters and sea life that we discover when we're tide pooling. We talk about how to treat the organisms that we see and can learn about, and how to take care of them. We also do a lab where we talk about the dangers of microplastics, and again, bringing it home to not this large concept, but based on the type of facial cleanser that's marketed heavily to women to exfoliate our skin, and those little, plastic beads that will never break down, and how if we use them and cleanse our face or cleanse our body or use them as a scrub and they go down a drain, and just how that cycle of life ends up impacting all of the animals in the water. And then also, because we oftentimes eat fish, because a lot of our Native American community members eat fish, and it's a huge part of their diet, it impacts us still in the end. So we're causing harm, but it ends up also harming us in the end, in addition to all of the critters in between. We have done beach cleanups at parks like Jack Hyde Park. We teach the girls to do a letter to the editor. So after we spend, our camps are typically a couple of days, but after we spend time learning about how we are impacting the environment and learning about what we can do, as Alea mentioned, to change our behavior and to be better consumers of the environment and caretakers of the environment, we work together to write letters to the editor. And so the photos that you have in front of you, there's Alea in the yellow, and she is writing in her journal and just taking note of some of her observations from camp, and that is at the Demole Sand Spit. In the middle, there are a couple of, or a collection of seashells from some of our work down at the beach. And the picture on my left, I'm assuming your left as well, is another activity that we offer at the Environmental Justice Camp, which is usually providing the first opportunity for girls to paddleboard. And now we love it, and it's a part of the camp. Leah, you love it, don't you? Yeah, it's really fun. And I did not put the picture or video of me paddleboarding because I was terrified the first time. But we have a variety of activities, indoors, outdoors, learning about the environment, trying new activities. And I'm going to move to our next slide just to talk a little bit more about the work that we are doing. So here's a little more tide pooling and exploring critters. There's a picture of us taking a look at the equity index map, and we talk about the history of redlining and how if you take an old map of redlining in Tacoma and overlay it on the most recent equity index, you will notice that there are still areas that are lacking opportunities, and it is because of the historical and present day racism that still happens in our community. And not every community here in the Tacoma Pierce County area has the same opportunities. Everything from where there is proper sewage and water runoff to other infrastructure, sidewalks, opportunities to keep us safe, opportunities, just a diverse range of opportunities that lack in areas here in our community. And so we talk about what we can do to advocate for additional opportunities and why it's, we present the sense of urgency now and that we all need to be thinking about climate change and thinking about why some communities, if we do nothing, will die before other communities will die. Some communities will be impacted more than other communities will be impacted. And so we highlight, there are disproportionate numbers of people of color who are living near freeways, who are living in food deserts, who don't have representatives that know their issues or are close to their issues and can highlight them even in elected positions. And our girls don't have to wait to be any certain age, but right now in elementary, middle, and high school can step up and use their voice of advocacy. So, this is science. This is what it's like to put girls out in our community. I work with a lot of programs who are always asking, how can we get more girls of color? Or how do you all, how do you fill your camp with so many girls of color? And, the answer is going to be in your leadership. Girls of color come to this camp because I am a woman of color who is offering this experience. So there have to be the communities who are most impacted. And I know this as a Black woman. When I came to the Urban League, I said, we have to be leading this conversation about environment and how it's impacting our community. We have to not be invited to the table, but we have to step up to create opportunities. And so what I love about this camp is it's not just talking about potential policy, it is putting young ladies in their community and exposing them to women scientists from the Department of Ecology, from the University of Washington, Tacoma, from the city of Tacoma, to environmental scientists, to biologists who know this information. And many of them Black women, many of them women of color, for them to say, I can have that career. We have explored the wastewater treatment plant. We have explored, gosh, so many entities. We've even partnered with National Park Service and with park rangers who are women to explore Mount Rainier and Olympic National Park, to discover and talk about different ecosystems here in the Pacific Northwest. But it is so important to put women of color in front of young girls so they can see themselves in those women and start dreaming of the possibilities and engaging in that work now. The Urban League took a bus of young people and their grandparents or care providers, their parents, their guardians, and we went to Eastern Washington, or I guess Ellensburg. I don't know if that's necessarily Eastern Washington, but we went to a renewable energy plant. And so what we're trying to do is not just talk about it and not just talk about policy and not just open books, but to take young kids, Black kids and other kids of color and girls out in the community to explore, to really confront environmental justice and equity and the inequities, and start developing their voice for change. And I'm going to show another picture. So here in the purple is LMA. We're outside doing some more observations at Demole. In the middle, we are on the Orion, and we are sailing with students from the University of Puget Sound and the Orion crew. And so these are, again, our girls with college students talking about local liberal arts college that I happen to have graduated from for undergrad and grad. So I have a lot of faith in that institution. But so being mentored by older students, older young people, but also learning how to sail. And we went on an overnight sailing trip with the Orion crew, who 3 of the crew members were women, but just providing these unique opportunities to let our young Black girls and young women know that these are the opportunities that you can see yourself in and pursue. And these things, these opportunities help our environment and help us to learn more about the Pacific Northwest and the South Sound in particular. And then there's Gabby holding some type of organism that we found on the beach. And I'm going to go to my next slide. So this is us with National Park Service. And, this is work that we get to do together, but I want to provide a reminder that we can't be advocates for green infrastructure or environment and not include as young as possible the community, and not just include, but put into positions of leadership. I was actually offended earlier this week by someone who invited me to join a diversity committee. No, put people of color in the positions, the executive positions, to make the leadership decisions, put the young people in executive decisions to inform you, and when you can, compensate them for their expertise, for their lived experience. But our girls help us to design this camp. We oftentimes ask them, what things do we want to keep? What did they enjoy? There's a lot of opportunity for input. And our first year, we did 1 camp that was 2 days. Our second year, we offered 3 camps, both of them 2 days. And this year, our third year, coronavirus had its own agenda. So we have scheduled all of the camps to date for spring, but we had 6 camps scheduled for this year because of the interest and demand. And lots of girls, lots of families are wanting to know more about STEM opportunities, wanting to know about local science, very interested in equity and climate change and what we can do now to make a difference, and why these young people cannot wait to make a difference, because it is urgent that we take action. But we're so grateful for partners like MultiCare, UPS, UW Tacoma, City of Tacoma, Citizens for Healthy Bay, the Department of Ecology, just all the local leaders who have helped me, because my skill set is I love to work with women and girls. And I have had to rely on the content experts to create curriculum in partnership with me to help our future to start caring about this planet and to start making decisions about this planet. So I'm gonna pause, but I'm so excited to do this work in partnership with all of you, to do this work with our youngest community members, and I will continue forging ahead, creating STEM opportunities, developing our future workforce, and letting women know that this is exactly where we should be leading the conversations and leading in our community. Leah, did you want to add anything? No? No? Okay. So we will be available for Q&A, but thank you all for the incredible work that you're doing, and thank you for watching our presentation.
Thank you, Tawana. There's a great question in the Q&A already, so queued up, and we can answer that later too if you don't want to answer it now. But thank you for that inspiring talk. Our last speaker for the day is Dr. Chris Schell, and he'll be presenting a talk titled, Where the Wild Things Are, the Impacts of Socioeconomics and Residential Segregation on Wildlife in Cities. Chris is an urban ecologist and an evolutionary biologist interested in the complex relationship between wildlife and people. This often includes how variation in society and ecological systems coalesce to form our natural and social realities. A new faculty member to UW Tacoma, Chris has been working with the Grit City Carnivore Project to uncover these complex systems for coyotes and raccoons and promote human-wildlife coexistence. All right, Chris, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Ani. And thank you, everybody, my fellow presenters, Tawana and Carrie and Russ and Kennedy. You all provide great, excellent work from the South Sound. I'm really proud and humbled to be a part of this group and to talk to you all about some of the work that we're doing, and hopefully also coalesce some of the thoughts about everything that's been talked about previously, and show how animals are also being impacted as well as people. So I oftentimes like to start, see if we can get this to go. I oftentimes like to start with providing just photos of cute and cuddly things, right? Things that we see in our cities all of the time. Now, mind you, these aren't all photos from North America. Many of them are, certainly. So this photo, for instance, at the bottom left of a javelina on, I believe this is in Tempe, Arizona, so close to ASU's campus, or river otters from Singapore. There are wildlife all across cities, all over the place. And a lot of this sparks our interest, right? It really creates and kind of drums up this curiosity that we've had since we've been kids. How are all these animals surviving in cities? Where are they going? And how are they able to do it so well? Well, that's what I constantly am thinking about, is how social systems and natural systems, particularly in cities, coalesce to go back and forth, providing these feedbacks in this larger mechanistic way in which changes in social systems influence changes in natural and abiotic systems, and then has feedbacks accordingly. So as Tawana had talked about earlier, thinking about people and centering people in this is incredibly important, because where all of the animals are is strongly dictated by us. And to that point in that initiative, I want to bring up the significance of structure, and really mostly the significance of trees. And this understanding of trees, I provide a photo of the Lorax here. For those of you that haven't read the story as a child, or you don't necessarily know much about it, you haven't seen the Dr. Seuss Universal movie in 2014 with Robert De Niro, that's okay. I'll give you a little bit of blip. The blip being that the trees are really important, right? And the Lorax speaks for the trees. So when Mr. Onceler comes down to cut down the trees and creates needs, right? This is one of my kids' favorite movies to watch. There are huge consequences for the ecosystem, for the environment, for people's health, and for the animals. So let's keep going down this logic, right? Let's think about this. And here I just provide a photo of Mumbai. Now, without me telling you anything, you probably could guess where most of the money is, just by telling where the trees are. So I'll just give you a couple of circles here. Here are some green circles highlighting in some of the slums in Mumbai where a couple of these trees are. This has a major, major, major impact in how people and wildlife survive and persist in cities. And again, I'm providing a photo of Mumbai. I could also provide a photo aerial of Tacoma or Seattle or Olympia or Portland or Vancouver. You name the city in the Pacific Northwest, I guarantee you I could find maybe not as stark, but certainly some differences that are graded as a function of things like economy and race. And this all compounds into what's known in ecology as the luxury effect. This idea that species richness and biodiversity across plants and animals is positively associated with wealth. Now, mind you, this isn't always the case, right? Sometimes you could have neutral effects. Sometimes you could have negative relationships. But for the majority of examples that we have across the globe, we see this luxury effect occur. Essentially, what this is saying is that wealth fundamentally structures ecological communities worldwide. So there have been studies, and this is to go a little bit into the ecological dynamics of it all. So for those of you that are ecologically inclined, here are some studies over here on the right that you can take a look at and the results that they found. So for primary producers, all of our plants, there is greater tree species diversity in richer neighborhoods, greater tree canopy cover, more native species, and greater overall vegetation generally. That leads to increasing primary consumer abundances like arthropods. So there's greater arthropod diversity, like all of the bugs, and of course, also spiders as well that are in these richer neighborhoods. There are also greater abundances and diversity of secondary consumers. So bird diversity and lizard species richness also is increased in these richer neighborhoods. It then flows all the way up to mammals. So even for tertiary consumers, we see differences in what areas mammals occupy and where they're seen the most. This is all important because this influences how we say, for instance, mitigate any environmental disturbances like industrial pollution, air or water, like pollution when it comes to other contaminants. Tawana had brought up earlier a lot of the microplastics. Having a healthier ecosystem helps to mitigate some of those impacts. When you have reduced species biodiversity, it reduces your ability to actually have that mitigation technique. Same thing with the rainwater gardens. If you have a reduced diversity in your rainwater gardens, that means that you have a reduced ability to mitigate against those environmental pollutants. And lo and behold, in low-income neighborhoods, which are predominantly Black and brown, which are because of legacies and current conditions in terms of racism and environmental injustice, those communities have less of an ability to guard against those pollutants and are more proximal to those pollutants. Not only that, not only seeing ecological parameters, we're also seeing evolution in cities as a function of inequality. So for instance, a study in Baltimore, Maryland just recently shown that mosquitoes tend to be bigger in lower income neighborhoods. Why is that important? Well, that's particularly important because if they're bigger, that means they have greater reproductive output and they're more efficient disease vectors, which means that the risk and vulnerabilities of low-income communities, again, predominantly Black and brown, they have a higher risk of mosquito-borne and zoonotic-borne diseases than others do. Also note that in the last few years, the UW Tacoma, in collaboration with Point Defiance Zoo and Aquarium and Metro Parks Tacoma, came together to also explore the luxury effect for mammals. So we came together to develop the Grit City Carnivore Project, in which we use camera traps that you may see here on the right on the tree to observe what animals are where. This gives us the ability, again, to see all of the cute and cuddly things. So this map here on the right is showing you different locations of where we have put a camera. If you're curious, yes, we do in fact have cameras out right now to even document changes in animal distributions as a function of COVID-19 and stay-at-home measures. So we've been monitoring urban mammals since fall of 2018 and have anywhere between 29 to 45 cameras out per month block, so October, January, April, and July on these urban to rural transects. I should note, if you're interested and you want to learn more information, this is part of a nationwide collaboration known as the Urban Wildlife Information Network. This design is also shared with many other cities, including Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, and several others, and Seattle up north. So we have a lot of Seattle partners that work with us as well. It's a great way, as kind of Tawana had mentioned earlier, it's a great way of getting outside, doing stuff in nature, working with different communities, working with kids K through 12, and with undergraduate and graduate students, and working just generally with community members who are very much interested in their natural world. And we don't catch all of the good stuff on our camera traps. We sometimes are just on site and see, say for instance, this raccoon photo that we caught at Point Defiance Park, or these red-eared slider turtles that we saw in Puyallup. And then here just as a sampling of some of the images that we've caught from many of our different sites all across Tacoma. So the photo in the top right here is a troop of raccoons that was caught on UW's Giving Garden. This photo of this coyote here was at Charlotte's Blueberry Park. We have a couple of other photos that are even further out to our rural fringe. So this photo of this black-tailed deer is out near Northwest Track. So now that I'm showing you the cute and cuddly, to return back to the luxury effect, we were just really curious for some preliminary analyses. Since we've been tagging over about 100,000 photos, we wanted to see, all right, well, is there any relationship between the number of species that we detect on camera just for one season? So we just looked at our spring 2019 season. We just recently got most of our data tagged. Tagging meaning how many animals do we see at each camera? And then we looked at median household income as a proxy for neighborhood wealth. What did we see? Well, even here in Tacoma, we're seeing that same relationship. So as median household income increases, the number of mammalian species that we detect also increases. To just, again, put a feather in our cap as Tacoma, really not something to be proud of, but our urban mammal communities are also structured by wealth, which means that we need to start thinking about how do we improve our ecosystems. I've been talking a lot about animals, but it should be noted it's not just animals. It's also a ton of abiotic factors as well, including things like urban heat island effects. You may notice if you live in a city, but you've also been out to the country, in the country it can be a little bit cooler. In the city, it's hotter because we have greater cover of impervious surfaces. That's known as the urban heat island effect. Essentially, gravel, asphalt retains and holds on to more heat, meaning that cities can be anywhere from 3 to 10 degrees hotter Celsius. Here I just take a snapshot. They didn't have one of Tacoma, but in Seattle, they show how surface temperature matches up with income. So if you live in an environment that is a low income neighborhood, you're more likely to experience greater intensities of urban heat island. Not only that, there have been several other studies. This one in particular I cite from Christopher Taysom et al. In 2019 shows that Black and brown communities across many different cities, here I have a photo just of LA, but from many different cities, experience more of the air pollution burden compared to wealthier, predominantly white communities. And that's even after you control for wealth. And why is all of this important? Well, because health inequalities stem from these environmental disturbances, stem from these inequalities in economy. So Black and brown communities have greater risk of heat stroke, greater risk of increasing diseases and cancers because of proximity to industrial pollutants, reduced air quality, which increases respiratory illnesses, reduced access to green space, which compounds to essentially help mitigate mental and physical health benefits. Those communities don't have that to guard against the previous three, and then reduce access to services which continue to compound health inequalities. Oh, and it would be remiss of me to not even mention that one of my recent colleagues, Kimberly Terrell in Louisiana, just recently published a study in Louisiana showing that air quality positively correlates and predicts whether or not you will die from COVID-19, which is a function of these inequalities, which is a function of 400 years of inequality towards Black communities. So even now, we are feeling the realities of these inequalities on our environmental systems and structure and who is dying. Quite literally, structural racism and these environmental disturbances that are caused by them are killing us and killing the planet. They're not just constrained to humans. So all of these factors have bottom-up effects on all of the landscape heterogeneity that we see that then influences the ecological and evolutionary patterns and processes that feed back onto us, which means that we need to be able to think very deeply about things like redlining, right? So Tawana brought this up earlier. Redlining was a systematic denial of various services to residents of specific, often racially associated neighborhoods or communities, either directly or through the selective raising of prices. And as again, Tawana had brought up, here is a map of many cities. You can go to the Mapping Inequality Project and find whatever city you were born and raised in. I'm from Los Angeles. That map is in here. I've only taken a snapshot of map 61 to 108 for a reason. There's Tacoma right there. There's Seattle right there. So we can build predictions on what these social parameters, how they influence the environment. And already there are studies, here's one by Dexter Locke, looking at how essentially in these A-graded neighborhoods, predominantly white, mostly wealthy, they still to this day have greater tree canopy cover, which means as a result, they are likely going to have greater niche diversity, which means they are likely going to have more organisms living in those environments. And again, all of this flows to influence, when residential segregation happens, it influences resource disparity, landscape heterogeneity, and biological community differences, which has both ecological and evolutionary implications. So this is all important, right? Social inequality at its base level is an ecological issue. It shapes our landscape. And as a result, we need to be very, very intentional about saying that environmental justice helps us to better think about sustainability, to better think about conservation, deconstruct, reconcile, mobilize our communities in ways that help us to save our planet and to really save ourselves. Justice and equity need to be prerequisites when we talk about conservation and sustainability. Building housing and affordable housing at that helps us to build habitat. So as an ecologist, I oftentimes think about the animals, but now we need to flip the script. We need to start thinking about how do we help communities being healthier and equitable to then make our wildlife healthier. We need to protect against things like green gentrification. When we plant the trees, we don't want to displace the people. That's incredibly important in order to guard against instability within our environments. Again, we're on the front lines of change. Here I just put Seattle as the third most gentrifying city. You gotta imagine, right? If they're the third most gentrifying city, Tacoma's gonna feel it because everybody that can't afford to live in Seattle, they're coming down to the South Sound. This is a very imminent problem that we need to think about very deeply. And then also centering the importance of public health is very important in all of these narratives. So as we're planting trees, as we're thinking about green space, we also too need to think about people's health and how health equity structures the way in which we think about ecological and human communities. With that, I have a ton of partners to thank. I know I've run over a little bit on time and just dumped you all with a bunch of data, but certainly I'm more than happy to answer questions in the Q&A. And shameless plug for if you want to shoot me an email later or follow me on Twitter, I'm more than happy to answer questions. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chris. That was great. I want to remind all our attendees to use the Q&A box to ask the presenters questions. I also want to make sure that before we're all signed off and before Aaron officially closes us, I wanted to say thank you to all of you. It was incredible to hear all your talks and your perspectives, and I would love to hear you all speak again, and I hope that happens pretty soon. I also wanted to say that the richness of content and the depth of thought, you know, was so great to hear. And it talked about issues that, you know, in some ways you would think were pretty simple to unravel, but really are not, because there are so many inherent like challenges that we face. So Thank you all. I want to be sure that I said that. I have an open question from Heidi Siegelbaum. Are you aware of any tax or other fiscal tools that can safeguard increased pricing or tax assessments so GSI does not become punishing for a community of interest? And I am going to put that out there if anybody wants to take that question.
Sure, I can begin because I was typing the answer to that. I specifically don't know of any particular measures myself, like specific measures. I do know that there have been proposals in other cities of talking about controlled rent, but controlled rent for an extended period of time, almost eternal, right? So having rent controlled that never changes, even when you have changes in the economy around it. I know that that may not necessarily be as palatable to some policymakers. So thinking about ways in which you create different environment complexes that have differences in which units are controlled and which ones aren't, also something that's possible. But for those of you that have any specific info on that, that'd be super interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll unmute myself for a second. I think this is one of the big questions. I don't think we've seen, this modeled. I think Heidi's question is a big one, and it's one at the very intersection of a lot of these issues. As we're scaling up green infrastructure, we are seeing big concerns, and Kathy Wolf talked about it in an earlier session. Displacement is a big concern, and it can't be taken lightly. But we haven't seen. I would love to hear otherwise, but as far as I know, I haven't seen or heard any municipalities or local governments creating codes, creating incentive programs that actually institutionalize that sort of anti-racist strategy. But it would be, I think it's time to see that.
I would like to, if we have a few minutes, I'd like a quick roundtable. If there is, in many ways, this is the community that can support the work that you all do. Tawana, Chris, and Carrie, and Russ, and Kennedy. Is there, how can we support, how can this community support the work you're doing? And I'll throw that out to Tawana first. I know somebody else asked her the question as well, but would you be willing to share your thoughts, Tawana?
Yes, we are always looking for new places to tour here in the South Sound. So new sites for our girls to visit for field trips. We are always looking for more women scientists to help to lead sessions that are exciting and engaging for elementary, middle, and high school girls. We, of course, are always looking for internship opportunities or volunteer opportunities. Several of our girls have gone on to volunteer and then work with the Point Defiance Zoo because of a partnership with them. So we are open to learning, visiting. Of course, we're working with young people. So if you have swag, items that are good for the environment, reusable water bottles, great things that we can include when we run the camp. The other thing that we have been talking about, this was for a question I was asked earlier, we, Tacoma Urban League and Citizens for a Healthy Bay have been talking about now that most of our spring camps are canceled, how we can move this experience online just to continue engaging our girls. This is an opportunity to not just focus on the STEM piece, but also the social emotional piece. We're building a really positive sisterhood in our community, and we don't want to lose that network. So we definitely are looking for opportunities to move our content online, but we're open to all types of professionals and experts and women who can say, this is my story, this is my career and how I got there, and just be willing to teach us all about our role here on this planet and how we can be better stewards of it.
Thank you. Russ and Kennedy, do you guys have, would you like to share a couple of things this community might be able to help you with? And
as far as the community, I don't know. I mean,
I think the support that we were kind of advocating for would not directly go to us, but for the people that, you know, are participating in these programs and getting their own rain gardens at their own homes or churches or outside their businesses, that's where the support needs to be.
essentially, we gave them the platform to voice their opinion. So that was kind of like the underlying thing. So really, I mean, just kind of telling the story.
Yeah, I think, we went over some of it in our presentation, but just providing, I mean, baseline, like long story short, is providing more of those in-person resources. Like there's a ton of digital resources, but I think what is more appealing to people or would do more is having those in-person, almost like tutorials or something to, you know, show people how to maintain these gardens or how to, you know, keep up with it rather than just telling them to, because I myself am a visual learner. So those things are just harder to kind of, what's my word? Not reciprocate, retain, you know, it's just, you know, better understood if it's something in person and something more hands-on than just these digital documents is something that we got feedback about. So that's support for others. We're just kind of the messenger.
Middleman.
thank you. Carrie, I'll kick it out to you, and then Chris, if you would answer as well, and then we'll make sure Aaron has time to close up as well.
Thank you. I would say something that I read one time is the best way to handle change is to plan for it. And as you've heard today, and from other speakers, and if you even just, you know, read the newspaper or something, change is coming and it's already happening. And you know, we just need the community around us to be open to learning new things, to be open to hearing what's happening and how communities of color are being affected by different things and taking action. And if you don't know what to do, then get out of the way. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Chris, you want to chime in, and how can we support the work?
Yeah, I think just delving into some of, and not to add on too much more from what everybody else has said, because it's been pretty awesome. If you very much are interested even in participating in some of the work that we're doing, we're hoping to put some of our photos online for folks to just tag. And also thinking about really deeply beyond the STEM part, what it means for you to be part of the community and what it means for you to have an ecological footprint. Because we all more or less are ecosystem engineers. Now, mind you, some of our power is different from person to person, but because we have the ability to influence our environment, and even more so at this particular time, we are even at a micro scale, we're influencing the environment much more intensely. So because of stay-at-home orders, we're at home, but a lot of us have been getting into gardening. I myself have never planted a tree, but planted a tree for the first time, learning how to plant and grow my own food, which is something I imagine a lot of other people are doing if you have the ability to do so. And even if you don't, say you don't necessarily have a yard, you likely are going outside and you're venturing into your natural spaces. So on a broader scale, thinking about how you can keep your natural space healthy is awesome. It's especially awesome for me because that means I get to see more coyotes, and that is, you know, more puppies for me is great. So thinking about how you can keep your ecosystem, however you manage it, safe by either doing rain gardens or cleaning up natural spaces or talking to policymakers, find something and do it. And of course, the obvious answer is just vote. Like just vote, please. That should be a given, but please just vote, because all of this happens also from a top down as well as a bottom up, and we need to consider both.
All right, Aaron, thank you, Chris. That's great. Okay, Aaron, that's you.
All right, well, thank you all. I'm gonna go ahead and kind of wrap us up and wrap up this, this series. I wanna start by extending a huge gratitude, a huge thanks to each of you, Chris, Twana, Carrie, Russ, and Kennedy, it means a lot for you all to show up and to reschedule this event and put your time and thought and heart into sharing what you've learned, what you're learning, what you're doing with this community of green infrastructure folks. It means a lot to all of us, especially in this time when we're all more isolated than I think any of us would like to be. So thank you very much. I'm inspired by your work. And, you know, I heard things today that some have been echoed in other sessions. Some really, you know, stand out. And redlining was touched on a few times, and in the conversations I've had around Seattle, around King County, it is such a profound impact and such a stark and undeniable reality that the legacy of, you know, racist policies is so very much still with us today. It is still here. It is still real. If that's a term that you've heard banted around, speaking to audience members in general, but you don't fully understand it, you know, do a little bit of research, look it up, look for the legacies of redlining and educate yourself on it, because it tells a very stark story. And you know, Chris, you alluded to this, and Tawana, you did as well, on you know, the impacts of COVID. People are saying so much now that, you know, the virus doesn't discriminate. If you say that by itself and you don't marry that to the fact that the impacts of the virus discriminate hugely, and therefore something's discriminating, if it's not the virus, it's us. We have to own that. We have to see that now more than ever, that the systems in place are, I mean, not just now, but have been for a very long time, killing people discriminately, and it's unjust. And this is the time to own that, recognize that, and fix it. And you know, that comes back to things. I feel like in every presentation it got touched on in one way or another. But I heard it was Bobby Cochran in the opening session from Alignment Partnership. He said, "We can't just fix the shit that broke." Pardon the French. But it's so true that, you know, the systems that broke for a reason. They weren't working, aren't working. And we just can't do that. I think Jessie Israel had a quote in one of her slides too. It was a Henry Ford quote, and I wrote it down, but if we always do what we always did, we will always get what we always got. And it's time to move past that. There's no question. This is our moment. I think it's our generation's moment to see the world differently and implement it differently. And whether we're talking ecologically and infrastructure-wise, as we do with green infrastructure, I think we also clearly need to make equity a prerequisite and justice a prerequisite for how we do that. And you know, it's great that we're starting these conversations. We have so far to go, but it's really gratifying to me that so many folks want to engage in this conversation, want to keep having this conversation. I see invitations in the chat to you know, from government to have conversations about policy. We've had, you know, the whole theme of this summit was intersectionalities with scaling up green infrastructure. We are really talking about complex systems. They aren't one piece explains it all. So it's not going to be a simple change. It's not going to be a light switch. It's going to be a lot of work and a lot of collaboration. And you know, I just want to look back on 5 years of these summits now. Each one has been different, but from the very beginning, the first thing we started talking about wanting to do was connect the dots. That wasn't the term we used, but you know, the .coms, the .orgs, the .govs, the .edus, connect the different sectors. And it's grown beyond that. But if you look at all of these presentations today and in all the past sessions, there has not been a one that didn't cross sectors, that didn't cross communities, that didn't show, you know, collaboration. And so if we have something to show for this work, it is the ability to collaborate, the ability to come together and work together. And, you know, to that end, that is what I get up in the morning to do. That is what Stewardship Partners convenes this event for, with our host committee, with our partners. And, you know, it's sad that we cannot have a together networking event, that we can't bring all of these great people together and have these face-to-face conversations. That is so vital. And it is such a big part of the reason that we convene. But we take that role of convener very, very seriously. And, you know, in light of that reality, I just encourage all of you to reach out, email me, email Stewardship Partners, if and when you run into that impediment and you do not know what comes next, or you hit a barrier within your own agency, organization, sector that you don't know how to get around. We're not going to solve it for you, but we know who might. And nothing is more gratifying to me than connecting people and bringing people together to solve difficult, challenging issues. And then getting to share that story again in the future. So with that, I'm going to close us. I just want to thank everybody once again for a great closing webinar, for a great series, for amazing work and leadership and bringing your voices and your heart and soul to this work and to this place and to this community. So with that, watch for emails from us next week. Following up, we'll have a couple call to action videos from Derek Kilmer's office, U.S. Representative Derek Kilmer, Dow Constantine, King County Executive, as well as Steve Shestag from Boeing, representing our sponsors and some of the other leaders at the national level who really care a lot about this issue as well. So we will follow up with that, and keep your eyes on the Summit webpage for links to presentations, to YouTube videos, and for other ways to continue the conversation. So with that, thank you all. Stay healthy, enjoy Memorial Day weekend, whatever that looks like for you, and be well.